In the final years of the Second World War, Germany possessed some of the most advanced weapons ever seen on a battlefield. Giant tanks, jet fighters, guided missiles, and revolutionary submarines promised to change the course of history. Nazi propaganda proudly claimed that these wonder weapons would save the collapsing Third Reich and bring victory even when defeat seemed inevitable. But among all these incredible inventions, one weapon stood above the rest in terms of expectations. It was supposed to terrify enemies, stop invading armies, and reverse Germany's fortunes. Instead, when Germany needed it the most, it failed. This is the story of the German weapon that failed when it mattered most, the V-2 rocket. By 1943, Germany was fighting a war on multiple fronts. In the east, Soviet forces were pushing steadily toward Berlin. In the west, Allied bombers filled the skies over German cities almost every day. Factories burned, railways were destroyed, oil supplies were disappearing. German commanders understood that conventional weapons alone would not save them. Adolf Hitler became increasingly obsessed with secret technologies. He believed that advanced weapons could compensate for Germany's dwindling manpower and collapsing economy. Among these projects, none received more attention than the V-2 rocket. Developed under the leadership of engineer Wernher von Braun, the V-2 represented a technological leap unlike anything the world had ever witnessed. It was the first long-range guided ballistic missile. It could travel faster than the speed of sound. It reached the edge of space before descending toward its target. No fighter aircraft could intercept it. No anti-aircraft gun could shoot it down. People would hear the explosion before they ever heard the rocket itself. To many Germans, it seemed like the perfect weapon. A miracle weapon. A weapon that could force Britain to surrender. A weapon capable of changing history. Hitler was fascinated. He ordered mass production. Factories were expanded. Thousands of workers were assigned to manufacture the rockets. Yet behind the scenes, there was a dark reality. Production relied heavily on forced labor. Prisoners from concentration camps were forced to work in terrible underground factories. Conditions were horrific. Starvation was common. Disease spread rapidly. Many workers died before ever seeing the rockets they helped build. Ironically, more people died producing the V-2 than were killed by the weapon itself. Still, German leaders remained convinced. They believed the rocket would deliver a devastating psychological blow against the Allies. In September 1944, the first operational V-2 missiles were launched against Britain. For the people of London, the experience was terrifying. There was no warning, no siren, no approaching aircraft. Suddenly, a massive explosion would erupt without notice. Buildings collapsed. Streets were destroyed. Civilians panicked. Newspapers described the attacks as something entirely new, a weapon from the future. At first glance, it appeared successful. The rocket worked. It reached its targets. It spread fear, but fear alone could not win wars. And that became Germany's greatest problem. Each V-2 rocket cost an enormous amount of money and resources. It required advanced materials, specialized fuel, complex manufacturing, transport systems, launch crews, maintenance teams. The resources consumed by one rocket could have produced dozens of conventional aircraft or tanks. Germany was already suffering severe shortages. Fuel reserves were critically low. Experienced pilots were disappearing. Factories faced constant bombing. Every resource spent on V-2 production was a resource unavailable elsewhere. Military planners questioned whether the weapon was worth the investment. Some German officers argued that building more fighter aircraft would have provided greater benefits. Others believed the resources should have gone toward strengthening defensive positions. But Hitler refused to listen. He saw the V-2 as a symbol of technological superiority. He expected miracles. Unfortunately for Germany, the battlefield demanded practical solutions, not symbols. The V-2's accuracy was another major issue. Although revolutionary, the guidance systems of the time were limited. Many rockets missed intended targets. Some landed miles away from military objectives. Instead of destroying strategic installations, many simply struck civilian neighborhoods. While tragic for civilians, these attacks had little impact on Allied military capabilities. Factories continued operating. Troops continued advancing. Ships continued crossing the English Channel. Bombers continued attacking German cities. The strategic situation barely changed. Even British leaders understood that the V-2 was frightening but not decisive. Prime Minister Winston Churchill remained determined. Allied commanders focused on winning battles rather than reacting emotionally to rocket attacks. By late 1944, Germany's situation had become desperate. The Allies had landed successfully in Normandy. Paris had been liberated. Soviet armies were advancing rapidly through Eastern Europe. German territory itself was under threat. At this critical moment, Germany desperately needed a weapon capable of stopping enemy armies. They needed tanks, fuel, aircraft, artillery, soldiers. Instead, vast resources continued flowing into a rocket program incapable of influencing frontline combat. The V-2 could destroy buildings. It could terrorize civilians. But it could not halt Soviet tanks approaching Berlin. It could not stop Allied bombers dominating the skies. It could not push American forces back into France. Its strategic impact was simply too small. As the war entered its final months, thousands of rockets continued to be launched. More than 3,000 V-2 missiles were fired against targets in Britain, Belgium, and other Allied territories. The destruction was significant. Thousands lost their lives. Entire neighborhoods suffered damage. Yet Germany kept losing territory. German cities kept falling. German soldiers kept retreating. The wonder weapon was not saving the Reich. It was merely prolonging the inevitable. Historians later estimated that if the resources devoted to the V-2 program had been invested elsewhere, Germany still probably would not have won the war. By 1944, Allied industrial capacity was overwhelming. American factories produced aircraft and vehicles in numbers Germany could never match. The Soviet Union possessed enormous reserves of manpower. British intelligence and logistics remained highly effective. Germany faced enemies whose combined resources far exceeded its own. Even so, the V-2 represented a critical mistake. It symbolized a broader problem within Nazi Germany, an obsession with technological miracles instead of strategic reality. Leaders hoped secret weapons would compensate for poor decisions, failed campaigns, and impossible military objectives. But wars are rarely won through a single invention. They are won through logistics, production, coordination, leadership, and sustainable strategies. The V-2 was decades ahead of its time. From a scientific perspective, it was remarkable. After the war, both the United States and the Soviet Union captured German rocket technology. Engineers who had worked on the V-2 helped shape future space programs. Wernher von Braun eventually played a key role in American rocket development. The same technology that once targeted cities later helped humanity reach the moon. In that sense, the V-2 left a lasting legacy. It became the foundation for modern ballistic missiles and space exploration. Yet its wartime record remains deeply controversial. It consumed immense resources. It relied on forced labor. It caused civilian suffering. And ultimately, it failed to achieve its primary objective. Germany needed a weapon capable of changing the battlefield. Instead, it invested heavily in a weapon that changed psychology more than strategy. By May 1945, Berlin had fallen. Hitler was dead. Germany surrendered unconditionally. The wonder weapons had not delivered victory. They had not reversed defeat. They had not stopped the collapse of the Third Reich. The V-2 rocket remains one of history's greatest paradoxes. It was one of the most advanced weapons ever created, a machine that opened the path toward the space age. Yet during the moment it mattered most, when Germany faced destruction from every direction, it simply could not do what its creators promised. It could inspire fear. It could demonstrate engineering brilliance, but it could not win the war. And perhaps that is the greatest lesson of all. Technology alone cannot overcome strategic mistakes, economic weakness, and overwhelming opposition. Germany built a weapon from the future, but the future arrived too late. And when history demanded results, the V-2 failed when it mattered most. Among these projects, none received more attention than the V-2 rocket. Developed under the leadership of engineer Wernher von Braun, the V-2 represented a technological leap unlike anything the world had ever witnessed. It was the first long-range guided ballistic missile. It could travel faster than the speed of sound. It reached the edge of space before descending toward its target. No fighter aircraft could intercept it. No anti-aircraft gun could shoot it down. People would hear the explosion before they ever heard the rocket itself. To many Germans, it seemed like the perfect weapon, a miracle weapon, a weapon that could force Britain to surrender, a weapon capable of changing history. Hitler was fascinated. He ordered mass production. Factories were expanded. Thousands of workers were assigned to manufacture the rockets. Yet behind the scenes, there was a dark reality. Production relied heavily on forced labor. Prisoners from concentration camps were forced to work in terrible underground factories.